Well, everybody, I want to welcome you to our weekly webinar. And today's topic, frankly, is going to shock you. Well, it may not shock you, but I hope you find it interesting. Because, our job is to find the perfect place to practice for people. And so we'll look at demographic characteristics of the population out there at large. Things like growth and income and education and all that, very important. Competition ratios, we talk about that. But today we're going to talk about one of the binary things that will really determine whether or not a particular site is right for you or not. Now, surprisingly enough, when I say a binary choice, some people go, oh, I know what he's going to talk about. Well, you don't. Because here is what we're going to talk about. You either are or are not married. Now, the thing about being married is kind of funny because it will often determine what will make a good place for you to practice or a bad place for you to practice, a place with promise or not. And Gary, Indiana is one example of a site in which it's just large enough to say, is it big enough for a single person to move to or not? Peoria, Illinois is another one that we often talk about. Peoria has about 100,000 people, primarily married people. It's a little bit rural. It's south of Springfield, Illinois, not too far from Chicago on the south and the west of the site. But we always have that question, is it a Peoria? Now, there are a few reasons why this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. It's because some people, when we will recommend a place to go, will kind of go, I don't know if that's really a place to go. Now, remember, that is something we do. We do recommend places to go, places to practice, locations that are going to be viable or desirable to buy. And very often that is tied to your marital status. So let me share my screen and explain just a little bit why that might be the case. Now, there are a few trends that are happening right now that are making it so that some locations are good, some locations are bad, but they're getting worse for some people and better for others. Let me explain. By the way, we're calling this the woes of the single doctor. Your marital status will affect the places that you will consider practicing. And you may say, well, I just want to go to a place that I can make a lot of money, that I can do good services to my patients. I want to be able to have a nice place to live. And why not? Well, you see, the problem is there's this whole marital thing, which makes some places better than others. And let me explain why this is happening. Now, back when I first started consulting in healthcare, the male to female doctor ratio, there were maybe depending, about 20% of female professionals, doctors. The vast majority are male. But you see, it happened that women tend to make inroads into considering that to be a good place to go. I want to practice. I want to have a profession, so to speak, that I can enjoy. But along with that came some complications. Now, ultimately, you have to keep in mind, back in 1980, the average age for men to marry was about 24.7 years old. Right, and it was like that, by the way, for 30 or 40 years before. I mean, everybody got married about that age. But in the last few years, as of now, the delayed marital age is 29.8 years of age. And you may go, so what? Well, unfortunately, the age that you get married and the age that you graduate from medical or dental school, your professional training, is about the same as it's always been. Now, what that ultimately means is, at a time in the ancient days, you used to be able to get married as an undergraduate, and a lot of people did. Many doctors would graduate from medical or dental programs with at least one child, very often two. Right now, that isn't happening. It's not happening because people are delaying marriage, but they're also delaying the age in which they have children. And that creates an inherent difficulty that nobody contemplated back in the 80s. It is that when you move to a location, you got to bring with you a social life. Now, some people say, well, just going to a big city is going to be the answer to all my issues. Not so much, and I'll bring this up again in a minute. One of the big helps that existed before that doesn't exist now is religion. It used to be everybody, a vast majority of people, went to church or affiliated in some way with a congregation or a religion. With less and less religiosity, and that's the term the demographers use, it means that that social safety net, that introduction to people, doesn't exist anymore. And so people go, well, I can always go to a bar. And of course, we all know how successful your social life will be if you depend upon going to a place where people get loaded. All right, now, not criticizing, I'm simply saying it's a fact. So as people get older and they're starting to look around, but they're single, they have to consider the place that they're looking as being a manifestation of their social life. When you are married and you have one child, moving to Peoria, moving to, well, any smallish town under 100,000 was still seen as reasonable. But now it's not so much, because those Friday and Saturday nights can get awful darn lonely if there is no one to date. But it's not just that. Let's go back to a couple of other little factoids. 2 doctor couples are becoming the norm. Now, you may say, why is that? I'll talk about it in just a second, but we find a disproportionately larger and larger number of doctors are wanting to marry somebody else who has an equal education, even though it may not be within the same type of practice. So you don't necessarily have 2 physicians marrying. One may be an endocrinologist, one may be a surgeon of some kind, but they kind of are gravitating toward people with equal education and a view on their careers. Now, ultimately, when this happens, a couple of facts occur. One is both partners have more debt, because it is more expensive now to come out of a training program vastly in debt. And when it's not just one doctor, it's 2, and you got to reconcile that debt. Both of you have to consider, we've got to have gainful employment no matter where we go. And it isn't necessarily going to be possible for you to practice with your spouse. Now, ultimately, having 2 people who are trying to run a full-time career, specifically in healthcare, there are big complications in family management. Now, I bring that up because, you see, it's not just a matter of coming out of medical or dental school. You often have to have a residency of some kind, an internship, if you will, where you're selling your soul to somebody else who's going to manage your time, and they may not be very nice about it. So the pressures upon young families is greater than ever, particularly if they happen to have kids at the time in their lives where previously they did have kids. This means heavy lifting. Now, ultimately, both of these partners want a career. Now, the book, The Bell Curve, kind of points out where people who are well-educated and very intelligent want to be with other people who are well-educated and intelligent. There was a time in which you would marry the pretty girl who happened to be in your small town, and it didn't matter what her professional aspirations were. She wanted to be a mom, just like her mother. But you see, that doesn't happen quite as often, and you're often living without a support network of your family. So with that in mind, the bell curve suggests that this is a truism, that people want to marry someone who's like them, and they're meeting people to date based upon their professional education. The other thing is, children are a huge complication. Now, there's kind of a myth, and as a demographer, this is not kidding around. It's important. You can't put off having children forever. I don't care what Cosmopolitan or Vogue will tell you. Typically, there is a biological clock, and I'm not kidding. Your fertility rate will tend to go down as you age. And I'm talking specifically about women, but there is kind of a complication with men too, who don't necessarily think that they are ready for fatherhood at a younger age. So children are a complication, but children are a desire that is vast, and it goes through all humanity. Now, Mike has children, I have children. I got 5 kids. I got grandkids. Look, I'm going to tell you something. One of the most wonderful things you can ever do in your life is have a child. It's worth huge sacrifices. And the difference between 1 child and 2 children is vast, isn't it, Mike? We'll talk later. Okay, Anyway, the point is, there are some things that are changing that you should be aware of. But the decline of social institutions, especially religion, is putting a block in many people's way. But there is more to it than that. There is a social stigma against marriage and parenthood, particularly when you're young. You know what we need to do, babe? We need to travel. We need to put it off. What's the rush? Well, the rush is physiologically and psychologically, you're often being uh, set up to want to be married and to want to have children. But it's happening now at a time that is exceptionally inconvenient. There's also a thing where your friends are going to say you're crazy for wanting to settle down. In fact, delayed uh, maturity is an issue. And many people and very smart publications are saying, really, you don't become a full adult until you're between 38 and 39. Okay, but that also changes a lot of things biologically. Biology hasn't really changed the biological clock. I mean, it's not changing its clock. We still have those imperatives and desires. Now, one reason I'm thinking about this is I've got kids who are in that age, single and married. Though they're looking around, they're thinking, gee, what am I going to do? And they tend to be between 22 and 38. That's my age range for my kids. I want you to remember something, however, that I don't want you to ever forget. As a demographer, I know this to be true. Nature is natural. There are times in which you're going to feel impulses to do something, and you're going to keep telling yourself, no, 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 no. But it's also true that that is a path to unhappiness. I'm not your dad. I'm not your grandparent. I know that. But I'm just telling you, don't be surprised if you decide to pull the trigger on this and everybody will disapprove. I'm saying you're not in a race. Nobody else gets to make those decisions but you. Fair enough. Now, what can be done? Now, I'm going to tell you, there is a propensity to start your career in a city with a larger population, a bigger dating pool, if you will, an opportunity to do stuff that you hadn't thought before. That is why a lot of people are starting their careers in larger towns, not smaller towns. Ironically, those of you who happen to be married and have kids will usually have more options and places that you can practice, not fewer. And that's because the stability, your background, is better for that purpose. Now, I'm going to strongly recommend that you get involved socially and at a younger age than most people will say is a good idea. In short, I want you to date seriously. I know, but as a demographer and a person who helps people figure out where to practice and how to be successful, I'm going to go against everybody else in the field and tell you, guys, it's a good idea to get serious about your social life while you're still in school. And that involves also your undergraduate years. I know there are people who are going to disagree. Sorry. Now, I also want you to do this. Number 3, I want you to have a little faith in yourself and in others around you. Believe it or not, people are resilient. They can do a lot of things. Yeah, you somehow think, oh my gosh, kids are so expensive. Yeah, they are. But, you know, they're not very expensive, particularly at the start. Yet, as they get to be adults, college students, whatever, they're expensive. It's tough. But I'm also going to tell you, in every way, I'm so grateful I didn't delay one more year for my kids. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you, and again, this runs counter to the politically correct crowd. I know that. But I want you to be socially active in your school. Get to be a part of the leadership in your class. Get to know people at church. Shop out a religion and become fully active. And the same thing is true of service organizations. Is the Rotary really just for old people? How about the Kiwanis? What about the Masons? What about whatever? I'm going to suggest you become socially active, and that includes at your dental society. Get to be involved in that group because it's going to help you in the long run to settle down in a community that may not be as big as what you might want otherwise. That's why it makes sense. Also, I want you to remember, doctors have never really been normal. The age of marriage is almost always older and always has been older when you have to go through all this training. I get that. I want you to be prudent, as most doctors are. But like I said, back in that third item, have a little faith in yourself that if you feel something to be true and it's logical, Don't hold back, especially not because of fear. And remember, life is not a race with a finish line. Okay, that is not the purpose of life. You won't do better. And by the way, one of the big questions I often get from doctors is, other people who are in my age range, are they doing better than me? Who cares? Doesn't matter. Now, I still am running that discount double nickels, so you can get a discount on our service. Now, Mike, I've given you about half the time.
I know.
To add.
I feel like I've sat through like a therapy session or something, or some kind of like counseling through school or something, that the wise old man comes in and he, kind of shares and imparts his wisdom. So thank you for that.
Well, look, okay, I need to say this. It's experience as much as research that has told me this. This is not all, just old wives' tales.
Just you preaching. Yeah, no, I get it.
Which is good enough. My kids love it when I preach at them.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. No, well, now that we've had that experience with you sharing that important stuff, Scott, I'm going to share something as well. And knowing this looks a little different here on my share screen, but I'm going to share my PowerPoint.
Okay.
Let's see how this works out here. Scott, are you seeing okay, we're good.
Marketing trends updates for 2000.
Yes. So those of you that are longtime watchers, I did say this to Scott before. I did celebrate 20 years of marriage, and I do have 3 kids as well. And so I endorse everything that you said, Scott. I wasn't disparaging anything that you said. It's all true. Now, on to marketing trends. Now, for those of you longtime watchers, you're saying, wait a second, Mike, we've gone over this topic before. And yes, every year at the beginning of the year, I go through what the new trends are for the next year, and for you to be ready and make sure that you're doing the things in your practice that are going to be, you're going to get the most length out of the year. But something else that I do every year is about the center point of the year, which is where we're about at right now. And I chose this week because kids are getting out of school and summer's starting, and many of you are looking at your summer vacations, or maybe your patients are looking at their summer vacations, and summer is going to come on strong, and it is going to be over, and we're going to be right into fall before you know it. And so this is the thing that I wanted to go over today, because most of you, frankly, are probably not doing some of these things. And so I want to review some of these things that I talked about, the marketing trends for 2019, just to make sure that you are on the right path, because most of you, frankly, are probably busted on the things that you're not doing, and you're just kind of doing the things that you've always done and probably getting the same results that you've always got. So let's go over these again real quick, just to make sure, and again, kind of a personal test for you to make sure that you're on the right path with your practice. So again, we went over doctor visibility. Personality marketing is becoming the absolute norm, again, for many competitive areas, and frankly, non-competitive areas. And when I say competitive, I'm not necessarily meaning that there's another doctor around the corner or across the street. What I'm talking about is competition for people's attention. That is the competition that I'm really talking about at this stage, because all of us have a certain amount of capital that we're willing to invest into visibility, into our attention, and every type of business is competing for that attention, whether it's Walmart or Target or Apple or Amazon, or the local dentist or down the street. They're all competing for that attention, and the ones that usually get it are the ones that deploy some personality into their marketing. And so you might be thinking, as a doctor, I have a hard time putting my personality into the marketing that I'm doing. But I'm telling you that this is absolutely a critical thing, and a change that from the static marketing that we did years ago and the yellow pages and whatnot. You've got to put your personality into the marketing. Now, this also applies to specialists. It's not just for general practices, especially pediatric dentists, orthodontists, some of those that deal really, really directly with the public and are going to be reliant on that long-term relationship that they're going to be building with the patients, it becomes very, very important. So just because you are not a general doctor does not mean that you don't have to do some personality marketing. Because again, it's because of what's out there and what is getting the attention of the patients. That's what they're expecting. They're expecting to see that this type of marketing is going to happen, because as they're getting it from all different sources, especially if your patients are millennials or Generation Z. These people have grown up with personality marketing, and so you've got to make sure that that's part of your marketing plan. Now, let's be honest, not everybody has a super colorful personality. That is a truth. And maybe you do have a colorful personality, but you have a difficult time putting that into your marketing. Maybe you're from another country. Maybe you struggle with English as a second language. And so at those times, you have to then look at an alternative and hire what I call a rainmaker. Sometimes you have to hire that person that's going to be the personality in your practice, instead of you being that primary personality. Again, there is some risk with that, though, because if that person ends up leaving and you've built the entire practice on their personality, then you've got some challenges. So, doctor visibility, how are you doing? Have you put your personality into your marketing so far in the first half of this year? Have you done those things and made those changes, and are you seeing the results? If you haven't done that yet, let me encourage you that for the second half of the year, and the summer's a perfect time to start deploying your personality or the personality of a rainmaker into your practice. And if you don't know how to do that, then you need to get a hold of me so we can walk through it for your practice. So the second thing, in a way that you can do this really, is live video. There's almost every single social media format has some kind of live video function that you can do. And it really, just like this webinar, we understand that not everybody can be at this webinar, and we appreciate those of you that do make the sacrifice and are here live. But it doesn't really matter if people attend live or not. It's the raw nature of these type of presentations that hit people at a deeper emotional level. And that is why live video is a great way to do it. So depending on your patient base, you might go live on Facebook, you might go live on Instagram, you might go live on YouTube. There's all these different ways, or you might do something like this and do it in a webinar and people attend. Again, depending on the different type of patients that you're trying to attract and how they're going to interact with you as a doctor. And frankly, a live event also is something that you can do, again, depending on the patient base, especially for prosthodontists and some of those others that are looking at an older population or older patient base. A lot of times going to senior centers and whatnot and making a live presentation can have a huge impact on your new patient numbers for the month. Now, the great thing about live is that it lives on forever. These webinars that we do, we continue to get great residual results from people that had stumbled on them. That's why podcasts are popular. That's why some of these other formats, once you do it and you put the work in and you record it, it's going to continue to live on forever. Again, whether that's Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and people have the ability to interact and bump into you as they're doing their searches. And so it's really a strong and very profitable method of advertising, because you can get your face in front of people without you actually having to be there every time they see it. Now, another aspect, especially when we're talking about social media, is chat advertising. Now, this, I get, is marketing 2.0, and many of you may be saying, I didn't understand what you were talking about chat advertising in last December, and I don't know now in June. Let me just tell you that chat advertising is fantastic because you can let the bots do the work for you. This is a fantastic way to give people an opportunity to communicate with you as they're already spending the time on the social networks. How are you doing? Have you deployed some kind of Facebook chat type of automation with bots? Have you done that yet for your practice? If you haven't, especially if you're taking online appointments and you're not doing this, then you're probably being super, super ineffective with your advertising. So Again, these are important key trends. The cool thing about chat advertising is it can be online 24/7, which is pretty amazing. Another one that we've talked about is video advertising. It's pretty crazy to me that that doctors aren't doing more video advertising, especially because there's so much time being spent by your patients watching video. And again, whether that's YouTube or Facebook or whatnot, people are spending time consuming video because it's easier to consume. They're still paying big money to companies to write these blog posts and whatever. Let me give you a hint. Nobody's reading the blog posts. Nobody's going to sit down. Well, very few people are going to sit down and read a lengthy blog post when they can just watch the video and consume the information in that way. If your practice has not deployed some kind of video advertising for your practice to help you spread your message and share your offer, if you haven't done that, then you're probably being really inefficient, especially with your money. Video can be very, very cost efficient at this time, way more than it's ever been before, mostly because we all have these amazing video cameras right in our pockets right now. Pull that out, learn how to use the video function, get yourself a little tripod, and start shooting video. You'll be amazed how much better connection you'll have with your patient base when you do it, and it's super, super cost effective, and oftentimes it's completely free. Now, this one may seem obvious, but I'm still amazed. It's incredible to me. I bet every single week when I go through and I do some evaluation for a doctor's practice, I still see that they're not utilizing social media. Welcome to 2012. I mean, social media has been around long enough that you as a doctor, if you haven't entered that world yet, you were so far behind. And it's not hard. It's not difficult to get into that world. Now, you have to make sure you have the right strategy and you know what you're doing. But social media needs to be an active part about what you do in communicating your message. This does not just apply to general dentists. This applies to specialists as well. And one of the great ways that you can combine video advertising and social media is utilizing social stories. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, again, depending on who you're trying to talk to. If you're talking to an older generation, Snapchat is not the right place for you. But if you're an orthodontist, if you're a pediatric dentist, even if you're a general dentist going after families, that's one of the great ways and places that you can communicate with your patients. Are you doing it yet? If you haven't done it yet, you're behind the curve. You need to get on your social media advertising and utilizing social stories. The last one is, again, Google AdWords and Facebook and Instagram ads. If you have not entered that world yet, why have you not called me? Why have we not had this conversation to help you get those deployed? Because you will get patients if you deploy those. So if you're struggling with patients and you have not done this and you keep relying on radio and yellow pages and all these things, you're wasting money and you're not being efficient, because that is not how people are buying things in 2019. Now, we go back. Do you have more time than money? Or do you have more money than time? If you have more money than time, then you need to get a marketing report from Dr. Demographics. You need to know and understand your market. You need to order a telephone consult. If you've got marketing questions, we do marketing consultations here at Dr. Demographics. All you have to do is go on the website and order one, and we can go through your execution plans, your AdWord plans. We can offer those services as well as being an outsourced marketing director. Now, if you have more time than money, if you're a new practice and you or a doctor still in school and you'd really like to understand marketing, we offer our dental marketing mastery process. You can go to the website and click under the marketing tab, and you can read more about dental marketing mastery. But bottom line, if you have marketing questions, we have the answers. Check us out on Dental Practice Insiders. You can email me at mike@drdemographics.com. We've got great resources that can provide the answers for you that, frankly, seem to trouble so many doctors. And the hard thing is they just can't get started. So if you need help getting started, you just have to reach out. We can help you prioritize. We can help you get the things in place that are going to have the biggest and most, the strongest impact on your practice. Scott?
Thank you. Look, I just want to remind everybody, the double nickels applies to the marketing stuff that we do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it is a way to save some money. And let's face it, it's real cash. And there is no long-term commitment to work with us. Now, let me just start off by saying I apologize for anybody that I've offended today about the marital topic, because there are some people that are going to say, you know, you're just an old guy. Well, yeah.
Old funny daddy, I think is what they're going to say.
But the point is, most of what we're talking about, both Mike and I in our topics today, will require you dealing with us on your particular case. We can talk about these guidelines and rules and statistics all day long, but often it's going to require just getting online to talk to us. And it's not very expensive, and there's a big discount right now to do it. So by all means, don't delay. It ends, I think, Friday.
Yeah, it ends this week. And we always get people like the next day that say, hey, can I get it on there? And no, got to get it done by Friday.
But you got to get it done by the time it ends, because we can't extend it. So, come on, everybody. I'm trying to give you free money. What's the matter with you? All right. And thanks also for those of you who are being kind enough to tell your friends and neighbors about us. We had a spectacular weekend in which people did kind of a binge on our webinars and in our podcast. And I'm so proud of them. But I don't want you to be left out. So come on, guys, get on the ball. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for being with us, supporting us, and we look forward to talking to you next week. Take care.